Hello friends, this is Scott, and this is the third of the planting videos I did from my last trip down to the hobby farm. And today we're going to grow onions from plants. Now here's the dried plants that are a little bit bigger if they bundle together. And then we have some of the younger ones that they're still growing and they're just sprouted in a container. And those we have to separate out, and I'll show you that here more in a minute. But a lot of people will buy the bulbs, which I've bought in the past, and put them in the ground. But I find the plants do better and they grow bigger onions. So again, we're doing two types today. We're just doing the ones that are been seeded directly into containers, and then we have some that are a little bit bigger that have been bundled. But here's some of the volunteers that I had, and this is from the pea bed that I planted on the first of the three videos. As you see, we have some onions, and we have some garlic, and we have miscellaneous stuff here. There's some garlic that you see. There's a closer look at how it's, if you leave a head of garlic in, it breaks apart, all the cloves, and they root, and you can just plant those in the ground. But here is the younger of the plants that they just seeded in a container, and you see how dense those roots are? Well, you just don't plant that in the ground like that. You've got to separate each and every plant and plant each one individually. Now here's a closer look at a plant, and this is a red onion. And as you see, nothing fancy with them. They just planted them densely in a container, and they did it early enough in the year that they could get them to grow, and these were planted even earlier, and so they have more size, and they've dried them off and bundled them together. And yeah, that's about the perfect thing to plant right there. Again, much better than the bulbs. They'll grow bigger onions. Now, like most everything, I like to lay everything out before I actually stick it in the ground. And it's not critical with onions, because these onion plants anyway, because they're, the greens will always stick up above the ground so you know where you planted. But anything to do with seeds or anything that's going to be buried in the ground, that's not obvious where it's at, I always lay it all out before I plant it. That way I can keep track. Because if you start burying stuff, you don't know where you started and where you ended, and you just have big old either overplant or underplant, and it's just this is the best way that I found to do it. It takes a little bit longer than just immediately throwing them in the ground, but nothing worse than losing track of where you're at, and then you're kind of stuck. You end up wasting garden space or overusing garden space. So here I am, nothing fancy. The soil's pretty loose because I made these beds last year, and I'm just able to, with my two hands, just dig a hole about an inch deep and just push them in and firm the dirt up around them, and just so they're standing up. And there's just a lot of them. This is not a hard process, but it does take a little bit of time because I'm planting literally, a couple hundred onions, I think, here. I didn't really count them, but there's a lot here. I'll probably end up picking up a few more. I grabbed what the nursery had at the very beginning, and they'll have other varieties coming in. I am planting red onions, some yellow storage onions, and some Walla Walla onions. And the Walla Wallas are like the sweet onions, so you can eat them like an apple. They're not going to give you that big onion. They taste like onion, but they're not going to give you the real strong onion flavor as some of these other varieties. So Walla Wallas are great to eat fresh, but they don't store. So I want yellow storage onions, so they get bigger bulbs, they'll store longer, so I want those for the winter. The red onions will bulb up nicely, but they won't last as long. And I don't believe I have any white onions here today, so I'm going to try to pick up some of those because I really like the flavor of white onions. And then the Walla Wallas, you eat them fresh because they're only stored for a few weeks at a time. They're not a long storage onion. Again, the bigger the onion, generally they last longer. They'll store longer if you store them in a kind of a dark, cool, dry place. The smaller the onions, they generally don't store as long. So here's a look at the fully planted bed for what I had. And as you see here at the end, I've got room to plant more onions or some other crop there. And there's quite a few onions there. So I still think, again, I'm going to get some white ones too. So it's like everything, I'm watering it in good. But here I am, I'm pulling the mulch off the garlic, and I want to kind of give you an update on the garlic real quick. Not a full video, just the end of this video. But as you see, I'm just pulling off quite a bit of mulch, or leaf mulch that we had on here. And I want to show you how well that mulch worked to help the onion or the garlic grow. And again, I did 4 to 6 inches, and it all flattened out with the weight of the snow. And so I've got to get the weight off here. And I also want to get the soil warmed up and to make sure that all the garlic are exposed to the sun. As you'll see here in a minute, there's some that were totally buried and they started growing, but they did not ever get exposed to the actual sunlight. And you'll see a little different coloration on those. And they'll perk right back up. So here's a look from ground level at the garlic. It looks really nice. But what I was talking about was those yellow ones. Those yellow ones were just, didn't receive any sunlight. They were just stuck underneath the heavy matting of leaves. And they'll green up. It's just when you first uncover them, no, they're just yellow, and it takes a little bit of time for them to get the chlorophyll going and green right up. But there's a look at what I planted so far. As you see, the first 2 rocks there at the bottom, there's one bed that I still need to plant, and not sure what I'm going to put there, whether it's going to be saving it for summer veggies or if I'm going to put broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage in there, but they're not that big of fans of garlic and onions, so I've got to figure that out. Well, if you like this video, please hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment. But that's all the planting I did on this trip, and there'll be much more planting videos in the future. But right now, that gets me caught up, at least to date, on the gardening. Thanks for watching.